Z, great to have you back. Really amazing that we can start this year with this chat. So much to share this time.
Yeah. And it's been, you and I, we've been having probably 7+ years conversation, but this is definitely a first. Happy 2024, the year of the dragon. I think there's a palpable energy across the entire ecosystem, whether it be AI or blockchain, right? And builders build, right? And users will continue to hopefully benefit from all the kind of new interesting ideas. And I think you're probably one of the most interesting person to have conversation about, which is whether it be technical ideas or kind of a high level philosophical extrapolation, right? So very much looking forward to this dialogue and this conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Not just for the journey that we shared together in Web3 and before we were both at Google to build to like our work in Silicon Valley. I think since 7 years ago that we really learned about what is Web3 and blockchain along the way is something incredible that whether sometimes a few hours a day, sometimes like a few times a week, that we get to learn so much about like the industry, but also knowing your own like destiny and what you want to achieve in this space. Just a little bit intro. Z and I have been really helping many of the entrepreneurs, especially schoolgoers in Silicon Valley to build things together. And since the TGI day of looking at machine learning and then blockchain and then about the China community and back to AI and again on Web3 is something that Z have a very, very unique angle to it. I must say design and product. Maybe you can even just say from these two perspectives, product and design, how you see about 2024.
Yeah, I think the one really be excited to have this conversation as our first kind of on-camera conversation. But part of it is also, I think I wanted to really shine a spotlight back to you before I even kind of go down the path of our shared journey together, which is, I think for the most part, you and I and the collective community probably about 20,000 ex-Googlers and all the various different people we have met. Collectively, we probably met over like 20,000 people in the past 7+ years, right? I think there are people who live in Silicon Valley and there are people who are Silicon Valley. And I say this in a very humble way. I think the part of that I really enjoy the conversation with you and the collaboration is really that I think you and I would both live the Silicon Valley ideal, right? Which is there's always more things to do. There's always interesting problems to solve, right? And I think that's really kind of the core ether of what is product and design. Design fundamentally, as Steve Jobs always says, right? It's not how things look, it's about how things work, right? Product fundamentally is what Paul Graham always said, make something people want.
Absolutely.
Right? And at that intersection, right, the traffic light is always, are you bringing user delight? Are you really solving a real problem? Which, and I'll punt it back to you, which is one of fundamental thing as a software engineer, which you're definitely one of the preeminent kind of a thinker in that space, right? Which is about solving problems. Right? I think the bigger the problem, the more interesting the solution. The bigger the problem, the more ambitious you are. Right? So with that being said, I want to prime a little bit. What are some of the most interesting problems that Harmony and you yourself personally, right, are looking to solve in the next 11 months or so? Because we're already into 2024.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I really want to echo that, right? So in the Valley, it's all about dreams and ambitions to build things together. So when we keep changing the name for TGI, ML, and then blockchain, and then AI, and then Web3, is what I now call just TGI Infinity. Right, it's not about like what you have done, what I've done. It's what we can do together that really seems like an infinite garden. And by the time AGI is here, what can we be part of this infinite productivity? And with human, it's very simple. We have so much time together, but yet so much longer that share the moment. So for 2024, it's very simple for Harmony. We absolutely thinking about how to bring utility for daily use of our users, our community, and driving back that the platform is so solid. So, and there's so much overlap about what we share. When we both of us start looking at social smart wallet to almost 2 years now. It is quite a journey, not just about the market, but what we learned both technically when the network is ready, when Ethereum is ready, and it finally seems ready. That's why it does seem like this week is strange that we are done sitting, but you and I have been looking at the same thing for 2 years about, not just about the 7 years of friendship and getting to know what Silicon Valley and blockchain has to offer, but like finally it's a good way to talk about like this is a product that you have a strong year to finish, and Harmony finally really showcasing and re-engaging our community and developer to like use.
Yeah. So I think some of the keywords to extrapolate: social, right? Utility, adoption.
Yeah.
And I'll append one word, which I'll maybe parlay a little bit.
Yeah.
The word minimal, because I know minimal for people who are, if you Google Steven a little bit, I think that word is actually synonymous with your upbringing, and actually probably for the past 2 decades of your life.
Yeah.
If I were to summarize Steven in one word, other than harmony or one, it's actually the word minimum, which I'll give you some time to talk about a little bit more, right? But from us, from our team, from a timeless perspective, right? I think I can summarize last year in one word, which is build, right? And summarize this year, 2024, in one word: growth, right? And I'll kind of give some contextual explanation for that. For people who are listening, there's no dispute. The past 18 months has been difficult for the entire blockchain, crypto, and Web3 industry, right? Definitely a crypto winter. This is probably, collectively, these are probably 3rd crypto winters we've gone through. But in winter, we're always kind of like, as kind of a protection, but also kind of a self kind of inspiration. It's like deep into winter, you build. And last year, collectively, I think we committed probably close to 30,000 lines of code.
Yeah.
Right. Smart contract code, which is pretty compact. We successfully joined the Ethereum ERC 4337 community. We got invited. And then on top of that, in the month of December, we were able to deploy the account abstraction wallet with consensus linear, right?
Amazing.
And then the 3 key line numbers I always remind myself in my darkest hours that we did get 200,000 people to download and install, right? We did deploy 70,000 account abstraction wallets at an average cost of $4. That's almost a $300,000 gas fee paying back to the network. So that's a huge positive. More importantly, the smart account abstraction wallet is no longer just a technical accomplishment. It actually did help many of the kind of the crypto natives to participate, whether being swap, lending, bridging, yield farming. So altogether in those 6 days when we launched last December, we were able to get about a little over $500,000 worth of liquidity flowing through, right? So we had a good building year last year. This is more about, can we grow it further, right? Can we, in Silicon Valley, we always say 10x, right? Well, with that ambition that you do need what are some of the new channels to acquire new users? What are some of the new narratives we can inspire people to believe in what we do and give us a shot, give us a chance to actually prove ourselves, right? So growth is definitely one of the key things in my mind, right? So I don't want to get too much into the details yet, because I think there are a lot of exciting things to talk about, which we'll probably share a little bit more. But I wanted to kind of back to you a little bit. I just had a chance to kind of quickly glance through the Harmony blog post, right? The word minimal obviously came back quite a lot. Can you just kind of really bring back, like, what's kind of the new motivation, this energy, right? Center around the simple word minimal.
I think that's really become the word now. I first of all want to congratulate. I think it's always like 3 years on the Web3 journey, and a few days of big success that you have achieved. And it's almost, I would say, like 10 years at Google to bring you that product insight and marketing growth like strategy that are so successful. So I'd love to come back in a bit to talk about like what we'll be doing together, both at Denver and this year of the smart wallet side, but also like where are the like great marketing approach to re-engagement and user growth that Harmony can learn from. And me personally, the last few years is I'm the one that making speeches and writing story and even doing blog posts mainly because of your push and your way to help me understand. And for Harmony, like this year, we are putting the big word, one finality. as a technical achievement for the platform and people to understand our branding. And I shared a little bit last time with my podcast, but today I really want to finally unpack the word minimal. Most people understand me that as a philosophy, as a way of technical understanding, but most users don't understand why this year many of the inscription is a new thing. They don't understand why there's so many DeFi and people are still experimenting. Many people call that done last year. Many people say that the yield rates will never be better than the U.S. Treasury bills rate. And this year, because our platform finally giving back the primitives, the way that I see it is many of the product finally usable without worrying about the smart contract risk anymore. Many products are still struggling if they continue to have scam, hacks, and risk that they don't understand. So when I say minimal on-chain and minimal as a way to look at the product and primitives, I see it both in terms of security, I see it both in terms of product, as well as some of the technical insight I finally put my mind to de-risk. So I'll jump back to the wallet that we both share the journey on as an example so that you can give your input here. When we say smart wallet, you and I are the first one getting super excited about Origin, as well as even Gnosis Safe back in the time. Loopring is some wallet that we both look at, and congratulate on the Android wallet launch, because we talk about it. I said that's really the hardest thing to do, and you did it.
So just for people who are listening, I want to double click on what Stephen brought up. Like I said, these deep conversations, if you rewind it back, they actually inspire you to have multi-year journey. I still remember I was actually not deep into it. It was the early days of the pandemic. You and I had these random conversations about, what are some of the future kind of the primitives or products that could really benefit not just a particular network, but the entire adoption of blockchain and crypto, right? And then you were the first one to actually introduce me to this concept of smart contract wallet. Now, with that being said, it was actually a very expensive idea because you and I were both big fan of Argent. At the height of DeFi summer, the 4 Argent wallets I created, I think if I look back, I think it cost me around $600 of gas fees,
insane,
right? I mean, for people who are listening, you can, for $600, you can probably buy a Louis Vuitton leather wallet, right? So that's kind of and I think that's why minimalism is actually important, because you can minimize the gas fee, you can minimize the call data. There are a lot of the ideas that can be packed into that. But going back to the wallet, right? Smart contract wallet. 3 years ago when we presented that idea, I think it was a little bit too far ahead. But in the past 3 years, I think things have evolved dramatically, right? Meaning probably the biggest major achievement in the entire ecosystem is actually the adoption of Account Abstraction, or ERC 4337. Started really at ETH Denver last year. So it's almost like the prodigal sons have returned. So I'm very much looking forward to go back to ETH Denver this year to really kind of show the report card, right? Exciting. And then for people who are listening, well, it sounds amazing, this technology. Well, what are some of the user benefits, right? So the user benefits are, well, it's a smart contract. So it's no longer just a static kind of a dumb piece of a software code. It's programmable. So what are the things that you can program with this smart wallet? Well, you can program things like spending limit. For example, let's say you have $100 in the wallet. You can say, you know what, on any given day, you should not spend more than 10% of it.
Exactly.
That obviously help you manage the security risk, so no one can just drain your wallet in one single instance. But also kind of maybe if you're not a very frugal person, you can actually limit maybe you don't want degen too much, right? There are also things like social recovery, right? What happens if you actually lose access to my device or my private key, right? You don't need to worry about private key anymore. You can actually have multiple people to participate to help you secure your wallet. Then there are things like more complex, for example, like limit order. In crypto, you cannot do that in using EOA, but with a smart contract wallet, you can program it. Say, hey, if the price of this particular digital asset, this NFT or this token drop below a certain percentage, go ahead and buy. You can actually set that up, right? And then there are even things like security, because I know like you're big into security, right? Then now you can actually do things like, for example, session keys. Meaning like you can actually limit the amount of exposure for a dApp to your wallet. Or you can even do probably even more important, which is decoupling of the authentication
Mm-hmm.
and the actual transaction approval.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, for people who are aware of using MetaMask, for example, Gray Wallet, EOA, that private key is used both to authenticate into your wallet, also approve spending.
Yeah.
Now with account abstraction, that's no longer the case.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge win for the entire ecosystem, right? I can go on and on about the smart wallet, but it goes back to the complexity of like these code gets abstracted away because it's programmable, it's smart. That also lend to what are the things that we can actually continue to minimize. So minimizing is actually a important word because it reduces the surface area where the potential malicious attackers, hackers can actually target.
Exactly.
Right. So with that being said, what are some of the interesting things that from Harmony perspective that you're looking to basically deploy?
Yep. So I think the journey of smart wallet is too early.
Yeah.
Finally usable, finally people understand it, finally understand that there are so many different layers to it that need a smart wallet to be all share the same thing, having even the ENS that portable, and for sure liquidity being able to be transferred. I think I wouldn't say we are too early anymore because they're usable product and they're great traction. But we are so optimistic to be about being the early 1% pioneer that there will be still 100%, 100x growth room for smart wallet. And in terms of social wallet, you understand it as anyone, and as much as my first startup, to think about community, but also social referral and all these. Later on, we should talk about the lottery idea that you guys are going to be running on the campaign soon. And I am answering your question also from the opposite perspective too. As we said 2-3 years ago, we already started looking into smart wallet, and that's where get you to the journey to be the portal of the Web3 lives of your users. To understand where Harmony started with really collaborating with you on that, and the one wallet that we have with the one-time password and all the wallet campaigns that we do, now is the time to really use the result. And both Android and the iOS version is just beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, and I'll just double click on 3 key things that you just mentioned, right? I think the conversation we had 3+ years ago was the one wallet. I think there's still probably good like 5 or 6 ideas that have not been yet realized, right? And that I think that could be actually deployed, right? So watch out for that. I think there's new things that we're releasing. In terms of both iOS and Android, to be quite honest, we were flamed pretty hard by the community 3 years ago. Because most people were so used to desktop, right? The idea of a mobile-centric wallet, it was 3 years ago, it was kind of a no man's land, right? But 3 years later, I think that's actually widely accepted, right? If you look at some of the top 10 wallets, they're all mobile first now. It's not like mobile as a second thought.
For sure.
So we're happy to continue to evolve. And then, who knows, right? We actually in 2019 did win an Apple Design Award. So who knows? Maybe we'll have another chance to kind of win another design award, right, from Apple at WWDC, right? And then I'll kind of just throw something out there. I know you and I were a big fan of some of the other interesting kind of a user experience or user interface. One of the desktop wallet that we're prototyping right now, the design philosophy actually very similar to Apple's Vision Pro.
Okay.
So I don't want to say too much, but I'll put it this way, right? We may be one of the first Web3 self-custodial wallet that's deployed on Vision Pro.
We must.
Right? So I think that's exciting for us as well on that front, right? In terms of the social layer and then the lottery layer, right? And I'll kind of bring it back. All the kind of the technology reminiscence, this ideas, the problem we're solving is meaningless if you cannot get people involved.
For sure.
Right? And one of my favorite movie quote from Into the Wild was actually, happiness is only real when shared. I think technology is also only real when there's actually people who care about it, right? Whether it being AI or blockchain, is only real until people actually start really thinking about it and using it, right? And social is actually such a core primitive for people to get involved, right? So some of the key ideas, for example, we're looking to kind of release is actually the ability to send payments even when the recipient does not have a wallet. So I know one wallet that there's a version of that wallet. You can just send a hyperlink and that gets called counterfactual wallet creation. You as a recipient can create a wallet in seconds now, even though you don't know anything about crypto. You can receive this token, right? And you can quickly instantiate that, right? So that's one thing we're looking into.
Yeah.
Another thing is basically this ability, get people to be more invested in any particular project. And lottery is actually really good, interesting way to gamify and get large number of people
Absolutely.
to participate. So I'll take a quick pause there in terms of the lottery.
Okay.
I know you also, I want to kind of, this is like the typical conversation flow we have, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned Inscription,
Yeah.
right? Can you just kind of help me understand, like, what is the thing that's most exciting about Inscription?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really think Inscription was a trigger point for most people to understand, wow, not just about Bitcoin market coming back and their utility there. There are opposite way to think about many of these DeFi primitives, security assumptions. As we know, NFT is just a JPEG with a hash saved. Most of it is even off-chain stored. And Bitcoin is similar, right? Whether you store the entire graphic encoded on the Bitcoin network, the fact that people recognize it means using just a JSON, which is the whole BRC20 standard, really tell people that it's really about the social consensus, that people need to use whatever primitives that they can, whether a smart contract or just a inscription or different encoding as complex as ordinal is okay.
Yeah.
What are the services and value created with the limitation and constraint is actually what breeds creativity.
Yeah.
So why Inscription is a real thing is not because it's a hype again, people just aping in and spending 100 millions of fees. It's people figure out to use a tool that people for the longest time thought need a layer 2, need another VM on Bitcoin. The answer is no. By the time people finally done the encoding and actually inscribe something that like hundreds of thousands of people that share together, that become a value. And what we're doing there is not just learning and copying exactly the same thing, but be able to know what are the insights that are applicable to EVM chains, but specifically to Harmony.
Yeah.
Let me say it again. It's not just about writing a few text or JSON on Bitcoin. And it's not doing exactly the same thing on the EVM chain. It's why. And what is the core of the new value that is different, and it's the following.
Yeah.
Instead of putting everything as smart contracts, a very generalized, very complex and templates, people still get it wrong when there's standard library to do certain thing. What will be the opposite of it? So the specific example of doing a flipping a token over to another network is what Uniswap X, Thorchain, and many of the chain flip as well as Anoma coming out with that. Let's just solve all the problem with the right intention. They call it intent-based actions, and just verify the action on-chain. That's as something that many people talk about, off-chain execution and on-chain verification as the same framework many people understand. But by the time people say that it's just Inscription, then people don't, they don't lose the technical insights to know what's next anymore. So for us, it's very simple. If we can provide any bridging services, swap services, acquiring the native asset as something that a user can use now, even though we require humans in the loop, off-chain verification, off-chain execution, we'll offer that.
Yeah, I think so. I'll try to tie a couple of things together, right? One thing that obviously I'm very excited about, that I'm really betting the farm on going to ETH Denver this year. It's actually happening about a month and a half, which is on proto downsharding, right? And then I'll spare everyone the kind of the EIP A4 4844 details, but the thing is exciting is actually, I think this is actually the first time there's a sharp contrast between modular blockchain versus like monolithic. By the way, I'm not making a judgment call, right? So Anatoly fans, don't come after me, right? I think what Solana's doing makes sense, right? But in terms of like the kind of the being minimal, being modular, I know one of our mutual friends, Nick Weiss, famous tagline is actually modularity, not maximalism. Maximalism is just the opposite of minimum, right? Yeah. Which is basically saying this idea that because you have the inscription, because you have Validium or data availability across multiple kind of layers now, it's no longer just layer 1s and layer 2s. Right. We have layer 3 now, which is like, okay, the blob data is actually, doesn't have to be stored on chain, right? Because this could be like 1 megabyte of data, right? You don't need to necessarily carry that block after block, right? So it's almost like a temporary cache, large scale cache. Use it for layer 2 rollup.
Yep.
And then, the actual execution data, that could actually be settled on the layer 1.
Yep.
Right? So I think these are kind of all the composable ideas that really kind of really help company like ours, project like ours, is like, okay, now the data storage layer, the execution speed is solved. I can come up with more interesting stuff
For
now,
sure.
right? So tying it back together, computer science is all about time and space trade-off, right? Now we are with proto-done sharding and with sharding. I think the space issue, the data space issue is being kind of gradually resolved. Now we can actually focus on speed. So if we have the combination of those two, then that's kind of what really got me excited about this kind of large scale. We're called the Lucky Cat Lottery or Mini Nico. For people who are listening, like, what is the Lucky Cat? If you go to any Asian restaurants, you see the Lucky Cat.
Yeah.
Right? It means the left paw means more users or more customers.
Okay.
The right paw means more revenue, more fortune, right? We call this project this lottery because, one, I think many of the L1s and L2s are fast enough to support a lottery draw for millions of people to participate.
For sure.
And having the draw happening on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis.
Yeah.
Right? So translation, why does this matter? Well, it matters for the network operators because if you have a daily participants, that's more engagement.
For sure.
It's no longer just zombie chains or zombie blocks being minted. There are people actively participating. And it's also a huge win for the users. Guess what? You can actually use any one of your on-chain activities, on-chain actions, to basically use that as a way to enter into this lottery draw, right? So I'll zoom out a little bit. Like for people who are listening, it's like, this idea was very much inspired by a proven mechanism design that was pioneered in Taiwan. So back in 1951, a little history lesson there. In Taiwan, it's actually just like many Asian countries, it's cash based. So how does the government collect tax revenue when everything's cash based, right? You can't. That's why even till this day, a lot of restaurants say, hey, if you pay me cash, I'll give you a 10% discount. Right. So in Taiwan, it was actually really smart. The local economists said, you know what? We're going to create a system where every cash receipt automatically enter you into a government sponsored lottery draw. So now every customer now, when they go to a local 7-Eleven or they go to a local Costco, when they buy a bottle of water or buy a new computer, they always want a receipt because that receipt enables you to participate in this government lottery. So it's almost like a incentive-based reinforcement. It's not government tax collector hounding on you. People reinforce themselves.
Absolutely.
Right? This idea has been running for about 60 plus years in Taiwan. Altogether, roughly generated about 40% of Taiwan's tax revenue. So it's proven to work. The participation rate in Taiwan is around like 80%.
Wow.
So that's huge, right? And then once every 2 months, there are hundreds of winners. So there's also it's not just a kind of a shiny carrot that's you have no chance of winning. By and large, if you live in Taiwan for multiple years, your chance of winning is actually pretty high, right? So there's actually net it's a flywheel effect. So this idea has enough of an ammunition, enough of a data point to say, we can borrow something that already works and put it on chain.
Absolutely.
And why on chain? Because guess what? Fully automated. You don't need a government department to run this. It's just a set of smart contract can be run. This idea could be deployed on any layer 1s or layer 2s, right? So that way, the layer 2, layer 1s can actually incentivize people to come back on a regular basis. That's utility. And in the world of crypto, gamification is critically important. So this gamifies it, right? And from a wallet perspective, it doesn't create any new user friction. Because any on-chain actions, that unique hash record, that in itself is actually automatically a way for you to enter into this lottery draw, right? So going back to why this is important, and what topic to talk about in 2024, this idea would not have been feasible 3-4 years ago, right? Because we're still dealing with the kind of the scaling issue. We're still dealing with like, how does the wallet actually participate? Fast forwarding this year, we're at the very cusp. This is actually feasible.
I think so.
Right? And that's why I'm excited, and that's why I'm sharing this idea with everyone. And then in terms of inscription, well, it doesn't have to, the ticket doesn't have to be a boring QR code. That in itself could be a JSON object, and the object could be graphical. And graphical can also mean, well, I'm leading this conversation a little bit. I know you did some really amazing experiment last year about generative AI. So now imagine every one of the unique transaction hash record could be actually, you can have a generative art, and that generative art doesn't have to be a JPEG that's stored on, let's say, IPFS. It could be directly inscribed on-chain, right? So there are a lot of ideas that's no longer just dependent on you and I to talk about. Other developers, other protocol builders can continue to carry the baton, right? So that's kind of where we're leading this conversation.
It's really a great way to see. I think what you said about 6 years of history of how it's implemented lottery, and in many countries too, I suppose, is how we think about, and the whole industry can think about incentives and engagement, right? The incentive is very simple. It's still a financial gain for lottery winners and for project to think about, like, these are the pools of resources that can bring engagement. We really have figured out all these, like, airdrops as well as community points, user experience. Those are given, but people haven't figured out when all these campaigns are over, what's next and what's regular and what's daily. People don't think about their chance of winning. Right, it would be really double a strike by lightning to win like let's say 100 million lottery, but the fact that it keep engaging and giving people a way to, like, play with different way of submitting the result or, like, doing any quests throughout the time is meaningful. And the general scheme, as you said, right, finally it's possible to be on chain, and finally for us to think about where the power of the inscription and what can be the way of really securing the randomness of all this fairness. It's a great way to think about it. It is finally the primitives being ready.
So I think this is kind of just a lot to unpack, right? Obviously, you want to take some of the indigenous property that are unique to a blockchain, right? Like I said, I keep saying this idea would not have been possible in Web 2 because who do you trust to actually keep the record? Who do you trust to generate a random number, right? Where do you store the database, right? So now, well, is it blockchain? It is naturally a publicly distributed immutable ledger, right? So you get that for free. VRF, I know Harmony is one of the pioneers was VRF and BDF, right? And there's Chainlink, multiple provider of randomness, right? And then on top of that, blockchain, the every single action is a unique receipt on chain. So why just continue to compile additional data record? There's actually utility on top of it, right? So my mom always likes to remind me, right? There's only useless people. There's no such thing as useless things or ideas. So now you can actually take this something, again, that's been accumulating on every block explorer, just a bunch of transaction records. That record can actually be used for something else. So that's really exciting part of it, right? And then again, going back to why this is such an important breakthrough is that we want some of these kind of accessible ideas that everyone can participate. Even though the chance of you winning is, like, let's say 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 1,000, whatever the number, the denominator, you actually are winning because you're actually sponsoring the development of these protocols, right? For example, and I'll kind of go side note or slightly off on a tangent a little bit. The recent announcement of the Bitcoin ETF, right? In my opinion, the winners are obviously the Wall Street, right? The major firm BlackRock, right? The ARK, right? Even Grayscale. But I think the biggest winner is actually the thousands of Bitcoin developers, because the fees, the gas are generated through the ETF trade, indirectly actually help fund thousands of Bitcoin developers to continue to upgrade and maintain the network.
Oh, for sure.
Right? And translation for people who are listening who may not be into the technical mumbo jumbo, I am a byproduct of the lottery system in the US because the state of Georgia was one of the first state to actually have a statewide lottery.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And actually finance millions of students, right? My education was funded by the lottery system, right? So this idea is no longer just about gamification or gambling, or are you doing something just to incentivize for your own self-interest? It's actually really a good way to guarantee the future development, the sustainable development of blockchain, right? And now, like, if this system proves out to work well, we're already in conversation with, like, some of the kind of major brands that, hey, you know what? For these off-chain kind of a brick and mortar or e-commerce transactions, right? It makes sense to actually have these records be on-chain, right? Because Now the composable idea is no longer just about DeFi. There is a possibility. I think we're probably still 2 or 3 years ahead.
For early engagement, yeah.
But in the next 5 years, maybe your next actual e-commerce receipt it actually is just a transaction hash record.
It's already happening for some chains.
Right, for some chain it is, right? So now imagine like, all these things are actually recorded, right? And with ZK, actually the privacy actually is there. I think in 3 years, we're going to have more interesting conversations.
I think so.
Right? But it's about seeding the possibilities.
Absolutely. So definitely want to pop up to generalize your ideas about thinking about how to redistribute and having people to engage to win a chance to win the lottery. It's a very broad idea that you think about the economy aspect of a chain and how to engage between a protocol with the users. And for sure apply in real life. And that's why I always call it, would this be a radically fair economy? And I want to generalize also because you think about product very broadly, right? How to bootstrap it and how to re-engage, but also the value created. You are the one that showed me the generative AI boom and the product around it. And I do know your wallet is one of the lead, not just wallet, but any product that really put AI in the consumer space. So I'm going to jump and finish the story about how technically it can get, about the minimal on-chain services, but love to really switch about your broader product strategy. What are the value that the user can get? I'm serious about the minimal on-chain narrative because there are also one key technical insight that I validate with many research and technical folks that really people are still just excited about the same means and fair launch and even initial Inscription launch and offering. But the technical aspect is what I actually think it complements very well for the last few years, that we put everything on chain. We make the EVM execution as parallel and as fast as possible. My question I ask all this is, for what? What are the people trusting in terms of security? What are the developer actually need to go through multiple runs of this? Still not sure. And honestly, now that you have done the entire operation and it works, you're still not sure whether your custody and operation is secure enough to operate a bridge, to have the wallet, and you click on a new website, maybe you get drinked because the front end deployed now have upgraded version. I'm going the opposite minimal now.
Right.
With a one key computer science insight. I must say it's my research specialty, but I can have an easy analogy to make it. Most service and smart contract execution for sure make it so general that no one know end to end what are you dealing with anymore. For sure, even not ledger. For sure, every bridge is still upgradable. For sure, every wallet you are just asking for trouble when the fund get big. The opposite extreme is you write every line yourself, and you only deal with people that you trust. That doesn't scale. What would be the minimal on-chain that you know things would get eventually resolved, and things that you actually can understand yourself is what I'm looking at. What I call minimal on-chain is very simple. The product, you'll see a few examples that we are experimenting launching already the next few weeks. The concept is what I want to distill to the point that people start writing programs so complicated that you don't understand. Is what one of the Turing Award winners said. Either you write programs so complex there are no obvious bug, because you just couldn't find it. Obviously, it seems to be correct. You've done all the testing that you want. Or the opposite, that you write programs so simple and minimal, obviously there's no bug. No obvious bug versus obviously no bug.
I think that actually reminds me of one of the key metrics at Google, right? For 10,000 lines of code, there's a certain expectation. There is a number of bugs that get surfaced, right? And that's just kind of a fundamental laws of nature, right?
For sure.
The greater the number of lines of code, right? It's not like stupidity or intelligence. It's just that it's just a emergent property. Complexity, right? And complexity really does breed security vulnerabilities, right? They're kind of like, they go parallel, right? So I do like this idea of basically encapsulating some of these core logics into kind of the most basic, the most essential element, right? And once you can actually pack into like a discrete unit, that's actually when you can actually sandbox it, right? And some of the kind of the, for example, when I was working on the early Chrome team, one of the core idea in early web, for people who are listening, they may not be aware of it. Back in the early 2000s, internet browser was actually horribly run because every single process is actually connected together.
Exactly.
But with Chrome, is actually every single tab is actually its own independent sandbox. It's actually blocked, and that idea was actually very much borrowed from Linux. Every single thread is its own secure sandbox,
For sure.
right? And that is minimalism, right? Because that idea of a kind of a sandboxing can only happen when everything is actually discrete and kind of minimal, right? And then fast forwarding 20 plus years later, I think most of the Web 2 sophisticated services, right, these like microservices or nano services architecture is very much a similar concept.
I would say so.
Right? And this actually also kind of really goes back into this larger dynamic of modularity. Modularity is just another fancy way of saying how to actually minimize the specific property you need to layer 1, layer 2, layer
Isolation.
3, right? Isolation, right? And the isolation allows you to have the mental capacity to be more focused, right? If this bridge is only supposed to do one thing, well, guess what? It's going to do one thing really well, right? And that's also, again, goes back to the core ethos like Steve Jobs, right? Which is like this particular product does one thing better than anything else. Simplicity
is a sophistication,
right? Exactly, right? Reduction of like your thoughts, the number of lines of code, right? The byproduct is that better user experience, less chance of being kind of having unintended consequences.
For sure,
right?
And that's absolutely what we need for security and wallet. And really, Z has been the early team of both Chrome as well as Android to understand how hard it is. And I must say, it's not just a principle of philosophy, right? Whether modulism or minimalism is a great way of guiding principle. The specific technique is really something finally able to connect together of the research that I've really spent many years on. It's called program evaluation, that you take a very complex or general program, and at the compile time, you already know that you only need certain features and certain part that they call it the whole program optimization. If not as a template that you partially evaluate to, it's very simple. A general program that deal with all kinds of spending limit, smart wallet interaction can be 1,000 lines of code. But if you ever want to only talk to send that money to a particular person or a particular address or a particular operation or a particular amount, let's imagine that 1,000 line of code for these 3 particular things, right? Is what I call the minimal social wallet. And now for a fact that you cannot audit that 1,000 line of code to knowing all end to end, but guess what? You may be able to reduce it to just 10 lines when you only ever deal with like sending $10 to this particular wallet. Then you're done.
I think this actually brings back to another one of your favorite topic, which is functional programming, which is like kind of this core idea, right? Every single function is purposeful, right? It doesn't need to serve multiple, classes of libraries, right? It's just like it does one thing, and that's what a beautiful line of code is supposed to be. You look at it, every line, every small group of lines of code describe exactly what it's intended to do, right? There's not like a nest of like I need to open up 15 different terminals to understand what is one particular code block supposed to function, right? So bring some of these ideas, minimize it, sandbox it, and once you achieve that, then now you can actually have these functions, these logics, live on the chain, right? So it's no longer just like verifiability on like audibility that's actually based on Git repo, meaning that if it's actually on chain, that means anyone who's actually taking remote interest can now introspect and validate. Because the brutal honest answer is that, I know you're a big fan of open source software, but the reality is this, right? The number of people who can actually truly get a Git repo and kind of like really curl it and just download it, synchronize the entire tree, and actually spend the next, 2 weeks or 3 months and understanding that entire code base, you can really count with number of fingers on your hand,
don't
right?
count human on audit.
Right? Because just the reality is that you just don't have the capacity or even the motivation to actually introspect that huge corpus of code, right? But if you make everything minimal, right, then you can actually say, well, this actually has a sufficiently likelihood being audited and being understood by human, right? And the reason why I'm kind of excited, even though it's not my day-to-day, I'm excited because if this idea is actually viable, what that means is maybe in the second half this year, instead of using, for example, some of these large, open source smart contracts, we can actually now just, you know what, we're going to actually just refactor the entire code base to be more minimal, right? For example, the smart contract wallet we're using, we're using the combination of zero def and Biconomy, right? But it's actually pretty unwieldy.
For sure.
Right? So the ability to actually, there's actually a minimally viable version of that. There's Onchain. We can hopefully swap it out. And that really does increase the performance and the security of it, right? So I think there are a lot of interesting ideas. And I think one of the things that I'm always excited about having these conversations is that you do spark some of the kind of interesting ways to reimagine what's possible.
And we must, right? We can't keep on losing tens of millions of dollars as an industry and not think about like what are the principle, if not the foundation we can build on top of. If we are offering a bridge but like scare about every day, there's no building of the next tens of years. And if we ask the user to actually look at what signing of the transaction, but there's no way of the UX or even knowing what that hash mean and that library version mean, what are the chances that anyone can use a product but forcing them to decode the hacks themselves, right? When you say refactor, we use swap in, it is meaningful. It's just that we need to operate at a human level. No one should understand like 100,000 lines of code. But they can understand 10 lines of code if it means like something that they would keep on reusing. And I think that should be the concept, right? Not the fact that you need to rewrite everything 10 lines per function at a time. Is the fact that now tools can do that for you. Starting with whatever library, template, general function programming tool, there should be a way. I really know many tools that can do that. As I said, many of the compilers technique that will be specializing, pre-compile, if you will, to be the point that that's why single binary image and whole program optimization really makes sense, even at Google level. And I finally think it's possible for our industry.
And I think this, to bring it back to reality for some of the people who are listening to this, who may not be technical, one thing that there's a dirty little secret that a lot of people who are non-technical, they always think that, okay, well, maybe the engineers just love to read hundreds and thousands of lines of code. The reality is this, right? Engineers are human beings. It's no different than any human being. For example, when you are presented a legal contract that's like 300 pages long, right? The reality is this: most people just sign it because it's unrealistic.
It's exactly that.
Right? It's exactly that,
signing
right?
transaction because our lawyer told us to.
Yeah, it's English. You can read it clearly, but you're not going to spend the next 6 days reading it, right? Flipping through hundreds of pages. So most of the time, you just kind of sign it, and hopefully, there's nothing nefarious.
It's
right?
really bad.
Engineering is the same way, right? Like even though there's like this repo that's actually open source. The reality is most people don't read it. So if you look at a lot of the security vulnerabilities out there, it's not that engineers are lazy. It's just like it's not humanly possible.
It's not possible.
Right? Just not possible, right? So this call for minimalism, everything be completely on-chain. On-chain is just really a kind of a precursor to that. It's a forcing function. For
sure.
Right? Because scarcity really does bring a certain level of clarity. That's why some of the best software code were written in the 80s and 90s.
And all the assembly language for games are really beautiful.
Yeah, that's and for example, one of my first favorite thing to read in high school was actually one of the game called Oregon Trail. I don't know if people are aware of it. It was actually written in assembly.
For sure.
Right.
All the like 90s games are.
Right. And by one person. So that means that one person has to actually be able to understand the memory allocation, right? The registry, right? Where things are, right? And it's only possible because at that particular time, the compute resource is so limited. The number of kind of like memory that's actually accessible by the developers is minimal. It forces you to be very clear and very concise what you're intending to do. There's no if and but, right? There's no garbage collector to help you out.
It still is today, right? Of course, the gas fee, whether for Ethereum or most of the bridge operation are still very expensive. But I'm not even talking about like block space and execution like expensive. I'm talking about security cost. right? Back in the day, PC games crash.
Right.
Guess what you do? You restart.
Yeah.
I install Windows probably much more than 100 times, right?
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, start over.
Yeah.
Server,
Yeah.
like back in the web server day, if it doesn't work, then the server is down. You don't provide services. It's not possible anymore, right? No one would say, let me just restart my computer or iPhone, only in the extreme case. In our case, the same thing. Now that the industry really talk about different tokens and value and smart contract, we shouldn't take the luxury of saying that I'll upgrade it when there are problems. And when there are hacks, I'll do the emergency cancel and just shut it down for a few days, few weeks.
Right.
All these are the cost of scaling financial services at the global of, let's say, even 100 million users and hundred millions of dollars, that our cost of back in the day of a few like memory chips is our cost of human pain when there are hacks and coordination of like so much different resources that count on each other.
Yeah. And then even just kind of continue to just really kind of bring this point home, right? Is that minimalism does not mean reduction of capability. And case in point, one of my favorite product launch in the past month or two is the Cybertruck. Tesla actually dramatically reduced the number of components that goes into that car or truck, right? They, for example, they use exoskeleton. So it's only because it's the material they're using. That means you don't need to have a whole bunch of pillars in the internal skeleton that dramatically reduce the weight, that increase the performance, that increase the kind of the range of the car, right? The ability to kind of go minimal is like, for example, they went with a higher kind of a gauge cables. They went from a 12 volt to 48 volt. That means, what that means is basically, well, now you need a less kind of relay chips in between. So that again is increase the capacity to do more. So reduction of certain things is actually counterintuitive. It actually enables you to do a lot more.
By far.
Right? So, and I think that's kind of one of the things that a lot of people don't understand. Well, does that mean we're sacrificing capability? No, you're actually gaining a lot more in so many other ways that you cannot even imagine, right? And I'll just even really drive this point home. By removing the buttons on your phone,
by far the best example.
You got millions of possibilities now, right? Before it was just 24 buttons on the phone. You can only do so many permutations.
101 for PC.
Right? But now you remove it. The world is your oyster. It's infinite possibilities of things you can do.
It is.
Right?
Now it's really a full spectrum of what is on-chain, full smart contract. Everything is done on-chain. To like, you still trust your best friend and ask a human to give you the over-the-counter money swaps, right? I think what I consider is minimal on-chain to be useful, right? For the like bridging over, it should be as fast as 2 network block time as the hard constraint. Other than that, it's just whatever we can design it to be, what can be off-chain, to be solving and routing you the best offer, to be on-chain, actually sending you the money.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we really conclude very well that it's not because that DeFi doesn't work now, or Uniswap V2 or even V3 doesn't work now. Uniswap X has to go through the software route and off-chain and even central exchange route, because the entire industry still has so much to explore. But most of all, the foundation has to be much more secure.
Yeah.
There's no point keep piling on different, even smart contract, even isolate them to be library. If you don't understand the 10 lines of code, that you will be at risk.
Yeah. So the kind of the minimizing the attack vector for security purpose, I think that should be self-evident. In terms of like minimizing the lines of code, actually in theory should improve performance, right? Because at the end of the day, computer doesn't need to go do line by line to actually compute what's being instructed, right? And that the increase both in speed and space capacity should also really kind of dramatically help us realize one of the kind of ongoing discussion, which is like, how do we go from multi-chain to being chain agnostic, right? Because that was a topic at the height of the DeFi summer, it was becoming less a kind of a controversy. Say, hey, the world is becoming multi-chain. Because 3 years ago, by the way, for people who are just new to the space, it's controversial. It's like, do you pledge your allegiance to Near or Harmony or to Solana or Ethereum? Nowadays, it's like, I think for the most part, people accept
for sure
multi-chain. I think that in 3 years' time, I think we are going to see this being chain agnostic, and that's a good thing because just like you said, if the bridges are highly performant, is on chain, is secure, then theoretically, user don't even think about how do I click on MetaMask, toggle down the 100+ networks I have, right, and maybe select one of the accounts. That should be completely abstracted away, right? And I think that's why intent-based abstraction, even as a marketing term, it does really help kind of really resolve one of the biggest fundamental user experience problem, right? And then I think that's one thing that minimalism does actually, again, is a good guiding principle. And then for people who are listening, the best intent-based abstraction is the little blue box called google.com, right? Underneath, there's literally millions upon millions of indexes and web pages you need to click through.
For sure.
But that little blue box abstracted away all the complexity.
Yeah.
Until this day, whether you like Google or not, whether you think Google search is broken, that interface,
just an input box.
It's just a box. There's nothing, right?
Yep.
It's as minimal as it gets.
No options, no settings or configuration to do search. And that's where I think we can really look forward to, right? It does not matter whether it's multi-chain or like different layers. And as much as it's going to be chain agnostic, if not even people talk about chain abstraction, the point is there will be so many more tokens, so many different communities that will live on different technology. We know for a fact, right? In all generational innovation and human breakthrough, it will always be more prolific of different technology that must work together.
Yeah.
And what have to come together is whether it's going to be a cross-chain portfolio management that you do have different native asset, but now whether the app that you use through or the technology that already solved behind the scenes that it will be bridge over, flip over, and then have the multi-sig that you sign over as much as easy as a call data inscription will be up to the designer.
Yeah, I think that's really that's why I think, some of these, we started this conversation like, what are some interesting problems? I kind of equate that to Jeff Bezos' famous 1997 letters, like customer satisfaction, because customers are never happy because they always want more. They always want something more. They always want cheaper. They always want faster. Problem is another way to describe that, right? There's always going to be more problems, right? And as long as you're fascinated with these problems, and as long as you have the resources to actually solve these problems, it's an infinite game that you're playing, right? And if you're excited with this, if you enjoyed playing this game, right? It's actually very exciting.
Infinite game.
It's an infinite game, right? And you should be able to derive some unit of joy out of it because it keeps your mind sharp and it keeps you always have that inner dialogue. What are some of the interesting problems I could be solving? Right.
How much time do we still have for the two topics that we want?
Well, we have we're a little half an hour, but I think
I still we went pretty deep on technical, if not philosophy. So I don't know what other big topics that that we can save until next time, but definitely want to hear more about how you see many of the global events this year, and coming back to how now that your user are onboarded, there are really 100,000 of them. Congrats, and really great to be part of it. And think about that. What are they craving for? Right, I think the market is back. They crave for incentives, airdrops, and the next cycle, I would say the next many weeks, will be about re-engagement and lottery. But for the rest of the year, is it AI? Is it design? Is it a chat? Is it a Telegram launch and integration that you can talk about?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes to all of this. And I'll put it this way, right? Outside of the tech sector, right? I think one of the things that we've been talking about on a side conversation is this idea of human connections and loneliness, right? I think you and I were both fortunate enough where we do have a close group of friends that these relations continue to bond and formulate. But I don't think that's true for the rest of humanity out there. It's kind of ironic. We have all the technologies in the world. People are feeling more disconnected, right? That's why there is that craving for some form of human connection. And I think the best embodiment of that is in Web3, which is very much community driven, right? So the idea of us launching Telegram is just that, right? When I first broached the subject about Telegram, this is one of the fascinating phenomena. You were the first person to force me to use Telegram 3-4 years ago, right? And then in the past year or two, I was like, hey, Steven, Telegram went from 400 million to 600 million.
It's incredible.
And 800 million. That was the last time when you decided, oh, maybe there should be a Telegram bot for Harmony. That was 800 million.
Yeah.
3 weeks ago, it was like, oh, it's 900.
Yeah.
And today I just checked, it's 950.
It's crazy.
Right? So Telegram is clearly indigenous for crypto, right? And it is open source, right? I'm not sure why so many Americans are fighting over iMessage. No, just go to Telegram, right? Telegram in so many ways has a similar capacity to maybe even go toe-to-toe with WhatsApp and WeChat.
By far.
So I'm very bullish on Telegram because it's open source, because it's also an indigenous habitat for a lot of the blockchain, crypto, and Web3 users, right? So we're going to have a native integration in our next release. It just got approved by Apple.
Very cool.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago. So that's exciting. And then on top of that, this is a little fun factoid for people who are listening. There are roughly around like 80 plus Telegram DeFi trading bots. The total liquidity locked last time I checked is around $450 million.
Wow, already.
That's really good, right? So there's clearly utility on top of that. And then some of the lottery things that we're talking about. For example, there's another feature we're exploring called BFF trade, best friends forever trading. Is basically you can follow someone's wallet address and you can actually mimic their trading patterns,
copy trade.
right? Copy trading, right? So instead of developing a new user interface and developing a new user acquisition channel, we're building all of that directly in Telegram.
It should be.
Right? So that way, there's less of a friction. Now, this is actually somewhat uncomfortable territory, and I'll put it this way, right? Because this idea of building a super app similar to WeChat has been talked about in the West for almost a decade. No one has successfully pulled off, right? And even one of our mutual hero, depending, the audience, whether they like Elon or not, he's also been fixated on this idea. There needs to be a super app, right? And my contention is that a super app is not going to be built on Web 2. Like, dear Elon, right? Like, it makes no sense to build a super app on a Web 2 technology stack, right? It needs to be decentralized. So I don't need to trust you or anyone else, right? And on top of that, it should be not one company dictating the utility, right? I just need a common kind of a distribution funnel like Telegram. And there could be multiple bots, multiple projects, multiple protocols to basically ferment some of the utilities. That's why Telegram is such an interesting kind of a phenomenon,
It's
right?
very useful.
Right, so we're participating in that, right? And some of the NFT stuff that I'm excited to potentially, having Harmony team actually directly participating with us. Actually, let's harvest many of the generative AI stuff that you guys have been working on, right? For example, the QR code. Well, a lottery ticket, the hash record, that could be the seed for generating some kind of interesting art.
I think so.
That could be inscribed on chain, right? These are the things that it's no longer just the building block. It's actually how do you put these blocks together that can hopefully formulate into a castle, formulate into a building that's actually habitable for various number of use cases.
I really think you drive home about seeing the market first, right? Like Telegram will be, I would say, the first 3 billion users, because like many other companies are already too isolated. They are growing, but not as fast as Telegram. And these are just market trend. I think the principle that you helped me form, if not really gave me the idea, is the whole small social groups. To understand why we have community, but actually still crave for intimacy of a small social groups with very, very much of a driving force how I think about product, if not even why the product will be useful differently than what OpenAI, if not other product designer think about the space. We launched one bot to think about, it's not just about another DeFi bot and help to do any automation and any DeFi, but to think about why you have so many different small circle that you would share ideas with people, whether AI conversation there or the DeFi, that the strategy and the trading will be there. So in coming, hopefully just weeks, that the lottery idea would be happening on our Telegram. To think about that, whether you're using the bot or in the Telegram, you're talking about certain campaigns, whether request to use our product. And naturally, the engagement you have inside of your private group, the one bot should respect the privacy and not leak about the content, but be able to account for the on-chain engagement that you already have. The lottery will be specific to You may have a 500,000 people Telegram group, but it's always that 1,000 people chatting.
Mm-hmm.
You may have a very small group, but very active about what you guys share at the gate access to the information.
Yeah. So I think there's two major ideas you just highlighted. Number one is basically, I think we are well past the era of like broadcasting based social connection, because you and I were around the same age. I think in the early 2000s it was all like, how many friends do you have on MySpace? How many friends do you have on Facebook?
Yeah.
Right. And I think even till this day, I think there's a clear delineation. The older generation, the boomers, the millennials, and that includes Elon, right, and Barack Obama, two of them, and Donald Trump, right?
Yeah.
We all want to have like large audience, right? Because that's just a byproduct of like your age, right? But if you talk to like the Gen Zs, the Gen Alphas, no, it's like they're not seeking a ton of like anonymous followers. What they're really seeking, what they're really craving for is like people that you can actually truly have a deep, meaningful relationship. And that can only happen in a privacy and intimacy of like a smaller space. So I have nothing against this digital analogy of like digital town square for Twitter. But the reality is, right, some of the most interesting conversations happen in a small cafe right next to the town square, right? Some of the most meaningful ideas are only fermented when you feel safe and secure, right? No one's just like, if everyone just have any idea and just run out to the middle of the street and start yelling and screaming, it doesn't bode well. And I think that's exactly what's happening. That's why Telegram is such an interesting petri dish for experimenting with this idea. Now, to go zoom in even further, right? Like, why does this idea of on-chain lottery actually tie into Telegram? Yeah. Well, now it's no longer about just having a large lottery pool to benefit the network operators. For example, lottery by design, as I alluded to previously, is a funding for public goods. For example, university education, that's public goods. Who wants to fund it? No one. That's a reality, right? But if you and I are interested in, let's say, funding the wilderness preservation, we can actually formulate a small Telegram group. It doesn't have to be big, right? Maybe just like, 500 people. If you want to fund a large scale, public goods infrastructure development, we can actually just formulate a smaller group or medium-sized group, right? And then fund it do that way. So that I think, this idea is really backs into one of the kind of the earlier kind of a rallying cry Vitalik kind of started. The end game for any one of these major network is a DAO, right? We're still on that journey. I know like 3 years ago, there was a major fervor for DAO. I think the idea is still valid. It's an evergreen idea. By far, right? But now you have smart wallet. So now it could be multi-sig. You have social recovery, right? Now you can actually have these chain that actually provide certain services for the DAO, right? Now you can actually have the communication layer, right? That's actually within Telegram. Messaging, right? Now the wallet is connected to these messaging services. That is the formulation of not just a super app. I would say it's a hyper app. But the difference is that it's not instituted by a hardcore Navy SEAL team of engineers inside of Tesla or Twitter. It's really comprised of like thousands and thousands of developers and communities who are putting their energy together. And that's a far better way to realize this long-term ambitious goal, right? And in so many ways, not to be too abstract, but isn't that the nature of like democracy versus authoritarian government, right? One person doesn't have all the best ideas, but a collection of people with diverse background, that's how you actually distill the best ideas.
That's still the vision of open consensus and open protocol. Right.
Decentralization, open consensus. I think it's kind of ironic, right? Every conversation eventually leads into, at the end of the day, it is about trustlessness. It is about consensus. It is about decentralization, right? In between, there will be hundreds of keywords that you can use to talk about the same thing. But at the end of the day, it is about that. And we probably can end on this. I'm loving to have another conversation about this, right? At the end of the day, it is about openness and freedom, right? When everything's decentralized, that means you can be open. That if you're open, you can be more free to talk, more free to express your ideas, more free to experiment, right? And also whether you're successful or not, that's based on effort and luck, right? But at least you can say, you know what, I was open. The environment was open for me to participate.
Absolutely.
And I was free to explore all my capacity and all my capabilities, right? And that's a beautiful thing, I think, in so many ways, right?
And I think that will be a great note to end on, just to not just congrats on the actual real traction of the wallet finally getting the users to use all these products on so many different great networks and campaigns, but the fact that 2024 is really the prime time to really have harmony, to have a different way to look at security and engagement, and for you to look at wallet being the portal. Yeah.
Well, until next time, let's keep the conversation going, both online, offline, on-chain, off-chain. All right.
I see. Thanks.
What's up? All right.